Chapter 1, 6 hours before the end. When I opened my eyes, I was staring at the cracked ceiling of the tiny servant's room. For a moment, I thought I was still dead. I remembered the hands shoving me, the shattered glass, the screams, the zombies tearing into my flesh while my employers locked the window behind me. I remembered watching as a spirit, unable to leave, forced to witness their lives after my death. The father had called it a necessary sacrifice. The mother had agreed. Their oldest son had looked away. Only the youngest children, 12-year-old Maya and 10-year-old Sammy, had cried and begged their parents not to do it. Please don't throw her. She's family. But nobody listened. When I died, the children mourned me for months. The adults never once spoke my name again. I sat upright so fast my heart nearly burst. My phone lay on the bedside table. Date, October 14th. Time, 8:03 a.m. 6 hours before the outbreak. 6 hours before the first infected attacked downtown. 6 hours before the world ended. And 6 hours before my employers murdered me. I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. This time I would not die for them. I spent the next hour preparing. The family was wealthy. They paid me little, but over the years I had learned every corner of the mansion. Every hidden storage room. Every emergency supply cabinet. Every security weakness. I quietly packed. Bottled water. Canned food. Medicine. Flashlights. Batteries. Knives from the kitchen. Camping equipment from the garage. By the time the family woke up, I had already hidden 3 large bags in an abandoned shed 3 blocks away. A safe location. My escape route. My future. At breakfast, I watched them. Mr. Hassan sat at the head of the table reading news on his tablet. Mrs. Hassan complained about the weather. Their oldest son ignored everyone. Maya and Sammy greeted me with bright smiles. The sight almost broke my heart. They were innocent. The only innocent people in this house. Good morning, Maya said. I smiled. Good morning. Sammy frowned. You look sad. If only he knew. I'm fine. The boy nodded but didn't seem convinced. At noon, the first reports appeared. Violent attacks. People biting strangers. Riots. Government warnings. The father scoffed. Media nonsense. I almost laughed. 3 hours later he would be screaming. At 1:40 p.m., I left the mansion. Mrs. Hassan stopped me near the gate. Where are you going? The market. Don't take long. Of course. It was the last order from her I would ever obey. Instead of heading to the market, I went straight to my hidden supplies. I changed into practical clothes. Filled my backpack. Grabbed a bicycle. And rode away. Far away.no goodbye.no warning.no guilt. Because I already knew what they would do if I stayed. At exactly 2:07 p.m., screams erupted across the city. The apocalypse had begun. People ran through the streets. Cars crashed. Blood stained the pavement. The dead rose. Just like before. But this time I wasn't trapped. This time I wasn't helpless. This time I wasn't prey. As I watched chaos consume the city, I thought about the family. Right now they were probably calling my phone. Wondering where their house help had gone. Wondering why dinner wasn't prepared. Wondering why I wasn't there to help them. A slow smile spread across my face. Because for the first time in 2 lives, they would have to survive without me. And unlike last time, I intended to make sure they remembered exactly what they had done. Chapter 2, the first night. My phone rang 17 times before I finally turned it off. Every call came from the Hassan family. I never answered. As the sun began to set, I sheltered inside a small hardware store on the outskirts of the city. Unlike my first life, I wasn't panicking. I knew what was coming. The first 72 hours would be the worst. The government would lose control. Hospitals would collapse. The infected would multiply faster than anyone could imagine. People who survived would be the ones who prepared early. People like me. That night, I climbed onto the roof and watched the city burn. Smoke rose into the dark sky. Sirens echoed endlessly. Occasional gunshots cracked through the distance. The apocalypse had truly begun. A vibration came from my pocket. I frowned. The phone still had enough battery to receive messages. One new text. From Maya. Are you okay? I stared at the words. In my previous life, Maya had cried herself to sleep for weeks after my death. She had secretly kept one of my old scarves. Even years later she still visited the memorial wall where survivors wrote the names of lost loved ones. My chest tightened. None of this was her fault. Nor Sammy's. I typed back. I'm safe. Almost instantly another message arrived. Mom and Dad are angry that you left. I snorted. Of course they were. You should focus on staying safe. A few seconds passed. I miss you. For a moment, I almost cried. Instead, I switched off the phone. The children were innocent. But I could not afford attachments. Not yet. Meanwhile, across the city, panic filled the Hassan mansion. The father slammed his fist onto the dining table. She stole our supplies. The mother looked furious. How dare she? The oldest son glared. Maybe she knew something was happening. Nonsense, the father snapped. She's just selfish. Selfish. The word made me laugh when I imagined it. In my previous life they had thrown me to my death. Now I was selfish for refusing to die for them. As darkness deepened, the infected finally reached their neighborhood. The first attack came from a neighbor. A man they had known for years. He stumbled through the front gate covered in blood. Mrs. Hassan rushed toward the window. Then she saw him tear a chunk from another survivor's neck. Her scream echoed through the mansion. The apocalypse was no longer on television. It was outside their front door. The family locked every entrance. But they had a problem. Food. In my previous life, I had managed all household supplies. I knew exactly what was stored. How much remained. How quickly it would run out. And thanks to my earlier preparations, most of the emergency supplies were gone. The father discovered this around midnight. His face turned pale. Half the water was missing. Most of the canned food, medicine, flashlights, camping gear, gone. For the first time, fear entered his eyes. Miles away, I slept peacefully. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The world was quieter. Not safe. Just emptier. Many people had already died. Many more would die before the week ended. I checked my supplies. Enough for months if used carefully. A huge advantage. But survival wasn't enough. I wanted something more. I wanted answers. In my previous life, the Hassan family had survived for nearly 2 years before being rescued by government forces. That meant they would eventually establish a secure base. Resources. Protection. Power. If I wanted revenge, I needed to become stronger than them. Much stronger. As I prepared breakfast, I noticed movement outside. 3 survivors approached the hardware store. A woman. An elderly man. And a teenage girl. They looked exhausted. Hungry. Terrified. The same way I had looked during my first life. The woman raised her hands. We're not here to steal. I remained silent. We just need help. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then I remembered the person I used to be. The person Maya and Sammy had loved. The person who had risked everything for others. Perhaps revenge wasn't the only thing I would build in this new life. Perhaps I would build something stronger. A place where good people could survive. And where monsters, whether infected or human, would eventually face the consequences of their actions. I lowered my weapon. Come inside. And for the first time since my rebirth, my future truly began. Chapter 3, An Unexpected Ally. The small group settled into the hardware store. The elderly man was named Farid. The woman was Salma. The teenage girl was her daughter, Lena. They weren't fighters. They weren't soldiers. They were simply people trying to survive. Just like most of humanity. For the next 3 days, we worked together. We reinforced entrances. Collected rainwater. Organized food supplies. Established watch rotations. Slowly, the hardware store began to feel less like a hiding place and more like a home. On the 4th day, trouble arrived. I was on the roof when I spotted a vehicle approaching. A black pickup truck. My heart immediately raced. Vehicles still running this early in the apocalypse were rare. Very rare. The truck stopped 50 meters away. A man stepped out. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Armed. Confident. Too confident. I raised my rifle. So stop right there. The man immediately raised both hands. Fair enough. His calmness surprised me. Most people would have panicked. He didn't. Instead, he smiled slightly. I've been watching this place for 2 days. That instantly made everyone nervous. Farid gripped his weapon. Salma stepped in front of Lena. I narrowed my eyes. Why? Because this is one of the few survivor groups I've seen that hasn't killed each other. The stranger introduced himself as Adrian Malik. 32 years old. Former military logistics consultant. Emergency response specialist. And apparently one of the most prepared people left alive. When he opened the truck, even I was shocked. Boxes of food. Water filters. Solar panels. Medical supplies. Fuel. Tools. Camping equipment. Even communication devices. Far more than anything our group possessed. Farid stared. Did you rob a warehouse? Adrian laughed. No. Then how did you get all this? I prepared before the outbreak. That answer made me pause. Just like me. He had known. Or at least suspected. Interesting. For 2 hours I questioned him. Every answer remained consistent. No contradictions. No suspicious gaps. No signs of deception. Finally, Adrian leaned back. Now my turn. What? You clearly knew something too. The room became silent. I met his gaze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. Don't worry. I'm not asking for your secrets. That made me trust him a little more. Only a little. Over the next week, Adrian proved his value repeatedly. When our water purification system failed, he repaired it. When infected gathered nearby, he developed safer patrol routes. When food calculations became complicated, he organized ration schedules. The group quickly began relying on him. Even I found myself asking his opinion. Something I rarely did. One evening, Adrian climbed onto the roof where I was standing watch. The city stretched before us. Dark. Silent. Dead. You don't trust people very easily, he said. I snorted. No. I noticed. He sat beside me. Someone betrayed you. It wasn't a question. I looked away. Memories flooded back. The broken window. The screams. The hands pushing me toward death. Something like that. Adrian nodded. He didn't push. Didn't pry. Didn't demand explanations. For some reason, I appreciated that. After several minutes he spoke again. I lost people too. I glanced at him. My wife. The words hit me unexpectedly. I'm sorry. He gave a small smile. So am I. The silence returned. This time it felt comfortable. A week later, Adrian revealed another surprise. The group was gathered around a map when he pulled out a military radio. Everyone stared. Farid nearly choked. Where did you get that? Adrian smirked. I told you I had connections. He activated the device. Static filled the room. Then a voice answered. A real voice. Not a recording. Not an automated message. A living person. The entire room froze. The man on the radio identified himself as Captain Omar Rahman, an officer coordinating surviving military units. According to him, several military bases remained operational. Government forces had not completely collapsed. They were establishing protected zones and rescue corridors. For the first time since the apocalypse began, genuine hope appeared. After the transmission ended, Adrian explained. Years before the outbreak, he had worked with military disaster response programs. Many of his former contacts were still alive, including Captain Omar. How much influence do you have? I asked. Adrian considered. Enough to get information. Enough to trade. Enough to make allies. His expression hardened. And eventually, enough to build something bigger than survival. That night I couldn't sleep. Because a memory had returned. In my first life, the Hassan family had survived. Because they eventually made contact with military rescue teams. That connection had saved them. Without it, they likely would have died. I stared at the ceiling. Then slowly sat upright. Because now things were different. Very different. In my previous life, the Hassan family had access to powerful allies. In this life, those allies were becoming mine. And for the first time, I began to believe that revenge wasn't merely possible. It was inevitable. Chapter 4, The Military Base. 2 weeks into the apocalypse, the Hassan family situation finally collapsed. Their food supplies were running low. Their neighborhood had become overrun. And worst of all, desperate survivors had begun targeting well-defended homes. The mansion was a prize everyone wanted. The attack came shortly after midnight. A group of armed survivors crashed a truck through the front gate. Gunshots echoed through the neighborhood. Windows shattered. People screamed. Mr. Hassan tried to organize a defense, but panic spread quickly. The attackers weren't interested in negotiation. They wanted food, water, and shelter. The family barely escaped through a rear service entrance, carrying only what they could grab. For the first time since the apocalypse began, they were homeless. They ran through dark streets while infected followed the noise. Mrs. Hassan stumbled repeatedly. The oldest son was bleeding from a wound on his arm. Maya held Sammy's hand as tightly as she could. The children were terrified, exhausted, hungry, and alone. By dawn they found temporary shelter inside an abandoned office building. But the infected soon discovered them. Hundreds seemed to appear from every direction. The family became trapped. Death closed in from all sides. Meanwhile, our own group had been preparing to relocate. The hardware store had served its purpose, but Adrian had bigger plans. Much bigger. One afternoon he received another radio transmission. After listening for several minutes, he turned toward us. We're leaving tomorrow. Farid frowned. Leaving for where? Adrian folded the map. A military base. The room went silent. Even I stared. A real military base? Lena asked. Adrian nodded. Operational. Salma nearly cried from relief. The next day we traveled in a convoy of vehicles. Adrian had somehow acquired through various contacts. As we drove, I noticed something strange. Military checkpoints were allowing us through without inspection. Soldiers saluted Adrian. Some even addressed him respectfully. Not as a civilian. As someone important. Very important. Eventually I cornered him during a rest stop. "Who exactly are you?" Adrian laughed. "I told you." "No," I said. "You told me part of the story." His smile faded slightly. For a moment he seemed to consider how much to reveal. Finally he sighed. "My family has worked with government emergency programs for generations." I blinked. He continued. "My father was a senior military advisor. My uncle is a cabinet minister. My sister oversees disaster logistics for 3 provinces." I stared. "You're connected to all of them?" "Yes." "Why didn't you mention this before?" Adrian shrugged. "Because people hear power and stop seeing the person." Several hours later we arrived. And my jaw nearly dropped. The base wasn't merely a military installation. It was practically a fortified city. Massive walls, watchtowers, armored vehicles, solar fields. Massive walls. Watchtowers. Armored vehicles. Solar fields. Medical facilities. Training grounds. Warehouses. Thousands of survivors. Thousands. As our convoy approached, the gates opened immediately. No delays. No questioning. No security checks. The guards simply recognized Adrian. One officer even jogged over. "Sir, welcome back." "Sir." Not Mr. Not civilian. "Sir." I exchanged looks with Farid. We were both thinking the same thing. Adrian had downplayed everything. Inside the base, the surprises continued. Officers greeted him by name. Commanders requested meetings. Logistics teams waited for his instructions. One colonel personally escorted us to housing. A colonel. Personally. That evening, I finally understood. Adrian wasn't simply a survivor with connections. He wasn't merely a consultant. He was one of the people helping coordinate the survival of entire regions. His influence stretched far beyond what he'd admitted. As I sat outside our assigned quarters, trying to process everything, Adrian found me. "You look shocked." "You lied." I omitted details. I laughed despite myself. "Omitted?" "Adrian, a colonel just asked for your opinion before making decisions." He rubbed the back of his neck. "That happens sometimes." I stared. Sometimes? For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely embarrassed. "I never wanted people following me because of my family name." "So you let us think you were just another survivor?" "More or less." I shook my head. "You are impossible." His laughter echoed through the courtyard. Later that night, emergency alarms suddenly sounded across the base. Everyone froze. Soldiers rushed toward command headquarters. Adrian immediately stood. A messenger approached him. "Sir, command needs you." "What happened?" The young soldier swallowed. "A civilian family is trapped 30 kilometers south. Large zombie horde. Air reconnaissance spotted them." Adrian's expression hardened. "Any survivors?" 5. The soldier handed him a photograph. I glanced down. And immediately recognized the faces. Mr. Hassan. Mrs. Hassan. Their oldest son. Maya. Sammy. My blood ran cold. They were alive. And somehow, fate had brought them directly into Adrian's sphere of influence. The same Adrian who now held enough power to decide whether rescue teams would be sent. And for the first time since my rebirth, I faced a question I hadn't prepared for. If given the chance, would I save them? Or let destiny take its course? Chapter 5, Training for Survival. The command center was tense as officers studied maps and drone footage. The Hassan family was trapped inside a highway service station surrounded by hundreds of infected. The rescue would be dangerous, expensive, risky. Several officers argued against it. Adrian listened silently before making his decision. "Send Team 3. The room fell quiet. One commander frowned. "Sir, that's our best extraction unit." "I know. The civilians aren't high-priority personnel." Adrian's voice remained calm. "They are still survivors." No one argued after that. When Adrian made a decision, people listened. The rescue operation lasted 6 hours. 2 armored vehicles. 1 helicopter. 12 elite soldiers. The team fought through waves of infected before finally reaching the trapped family. By nightfall, the Hassan family arrived safely at the military base. Exhausted. Hungry. Traumatized. Alive. I watched from a distant observation tower as they were escorted through the gates. My hands tightened around the railing. The father looked thinner. The mother looked terrified. The oldest son carried himself with less arrogance than before. Maya and Sammy looked exhausted. For a moment, memories flooded back. The laughter of the children. Teaching them to cook. Helping with homework. Reading stories before bed. Then came the memory of broken glass. The push. The fall. The zombies. The warmth disappeared. I turned away before they could be assigned housing. They never saw me. And I intended to keep it that way. The base was enormous. Thousands of survivors moved through its streets every day. As long as I stayed in the military district, the Hassan family would never know I was there. Adrian seemed to understand without me explaining. One evening he joined me during dinner. They're settled in Sector 8. I looked up. You checked? I wanted to make sure there wouldn't be any accidental meetings. I blinked. You did that for me? Adrian shrugged. You've earned the consideration. For some reason, that simple statement meant more than I expected. A week later Adrian approached me with unexpected news. You need combat training. I nearly choked on my tea. What? You survived because you had knowledge. He leaned back. Knowledge won't always be enough. I couldn't argue with that. In my first life I had died helpless. I refused to let that happen again. The next morning Adrian introduced me to a man waiting at the training grounds. He looked about 30. Tall. Athletic. Dark-haired. A scar crossed one eyebrow. His expression suggested he found most things mildly amusing. This is Cairo. The man grinned. You're Nara? I nodded cautiously. He extended a hand. Cairo Rahman. My eyes widened. Rahman? The same family as Captain Omar? Unfortunately. I laughed. Cairo laughed too. Hindsight. I already regret introducing you to. As it turned out, Cairo was Adrian's closest friend. The two had known each other since childhood. Together they had completed military survival programs, disaster response courses, and enough dangerous missions to fill several lifetimes. Most importantly, Cairo was one of the base's best combat instructors. Training began immediately. And it was awful. Absolutely awful. Again. My arms shook. Again. Every muscle burned. Again. I glared at him. I hate you. Cairo smiled. Good. Use that motivation. The knife lessons were even worse. Every mistake was corrected instantly. Every weakness exposed. Every bad habit removed. For weeks Cairo drilled fundamentals into me. Footwork. Balance. Awareness. Timing. Survival. Over and over. Then came firearms. The first time I fired a rifle, the recoil nearly knocked me backward. Cairo laughed so hard he had tears in his eyes. You're enjoying this. Very much. I hate you. You already mentioned that. Months passed. Slowly, I improved. Then improved again. Soon I could consistently hit targets. Move efficiently. Defend myself. Think under pressure. For the first time in both lives, I wasn't merely surviving. I was becoming strong. One afternoon, after a successful training exercise, Cairo handed me a combat knife. Not a training blade. A real one. I looked at him. What's this? A gift. His usual joking expression softened. You've earned it. I stared at the weapon. In my previous life I had died unable to protect myself. Now someone trusted me enough to carry a real blade. The feeling was strangely emotional. That evening Adrian, Cairo, Farid, Salma, Lena, and I shared dinner together. For the first time since the apocalypse, it felt like family. Not employers. Not masters. Not people who viewed me as disposable. Family. People who would fight for one another. Meanwhile, in Sector 8, the Hassan family was slowly rebuilding their lives. Maya often talked about me. Sammy still wondered whether I had survived. Even now, months later, the children hadn't forgotten. Their parents, however, believed I had either died during the outbreak or abandoned them. Neither possibility troubled them much. They never imagined the truth. They never imagined that Nara was alive. That she lived inside the very same military base. That she spoke regularly with some of the most powerful people in the settlement. Or that every day she was becoming stronger. Much stronger. And eventually, the secrets of that night would no longer stay buried. Chapter 6, The Family Nara Left Behind. 6 months after arriving at the military base, my life looked completely different. I wasn't a frightened house help anymore. I wasn't a victim waiting to be sacrificed. I was a trained survivor. A fighter. A rescuer. Someone people trusted. Most of that change came from the missions. At first Adrian and Cairo refused to take me outside the walls. You need more training. That had been Adrian's answer. 3 months later, Cairo had finally nodded. She's ready. I still remembered how proud I'd felt hearing those words. My first rescue mission was terrifying. The infected seemed endless. Every sound felt dangerous. Every shadow looked threatening. But I survived. Then came another mission. And another. And another. Soon I was accompanying Adrian and Cairo regularly. We evacuated stranded families. Recovered medical supplies. Escorted civilians to safe zones. Sometimes we fought. Sometimes we negotiated. Sometimes we simply arrived too late. Those were the hardest days. One rainy evening our team returned after rescuing 32 survivors from a collapsed shopping center. Everyone was exhausted. After completing reports, Adrian found me sitting alone on a rooftop overlooking the base. The lights below sparkled against the darkness. "You've been quiet lately." I smiled weakly. "I'm thinking. Dangerous activity." I laughed despite myself. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then Adrian suddenly asked, "Do you have family?" The question hit harder than expected. I stared into the darkness. Family. The one subject I avoided. The one pain I carried every day. Yes. Adrian glanced toward me. "Where are they?" I swallowed. "Country K." His expression immediately changed. Country K was far away. Thousands of kilometers away. Travel between countries had become nearly impossible after the outbreak. "My mother lives there." I paused. "And my children." For the first time since we'd met, Adrian looked genuinely shocked. "You have children?" I laughed softly. "Is that so surprising?" "A little." I punched his shoulder. "Thanks. You know what I mean." The smile faded from my face. "I have 3. Adrian stayed silent. Waiting. 2 girls. I swallowed. "And a boy." The words hurt. Not because I didn't love them. Because I missed them. Every single day. I looked down at my hands. When I woke up 6 hours before the outbreak, I stopped. The familiar secret nearly slipped out. The secret of my rebirth. I changed course. When I realized something terrible was coming, I called my mother. Adrian listened carefully. I told her to take the children and leave the city. I stared at the distant horizon. I'd spent years saving money. Not much. But enough. For the first time, I shared something I'd never told anyone at the base. I built a small house in the countryside. Adrian blinked. "What?" I nodded. It was supposed to be a retirement home someday. A simple place. Solar power. Water storage. A vegetable garden. A fence. Nothing fancy. Just safe. I sent every cent I had to my mother. The memory still felt vivid. The panic. The desperation. The fear. I told her to buy food. Medicine. Seeds. Everything she could find. Then my voice cracked. "And after that?" Silence. "And after that?" Adrian asked gently. I looked away. I never heard from them again. The words hung between us. Heavy. Painful. Real. For months I had pushed those thoughts away. Training. Missions. Survival. They kept me busy. But every night the same questions returned. Were my children alive? Were they safe? Had my mother reached the countryside? Had the supplies lasted? Did they think I was dead? "I don't know if they're alive." My voice was barely a whisper. For the first time since arriving at the base, tears filled my eyes. "I don't know anything." Adrian didn't speak immediately. He simply sat beside me, allowing the silence, allowing the grief. Finally he asked, "How old are they?" A small smile appeared. 8, 7, and 5. His eyes softened. "You miss them." I laughed through the tears. "Every second." For several moments neither of us spoke. Then Adrian stood. "I'll make some calls." I frowned. "What?" He looked down at me. "There are still military networks operating internationally." Hope and fear collided inside me. "Adrian. It may take time." His voice was calm. "It may take months. But we'll try." I stared at him. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Why would someone this important spend resources looking for my family? Why would he care? Adrian's answer came without hesitation. "Because if my family was out there." His expression softened. "I'd pray someone would help them too." After he left, I remained on the rooftop. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to imagine it. My mother sitting on the porch of the countryside house. My daughters helping in the garden. My son running through the fields. Safe. Alive. Waiting. And somewhere deep inside, a fragile hope began to grow. Because if anyone could find them, it was Adrian. The man who always seemed to have more connections than anyone realized. Chapter 7. By the 8th month of the apocalypse, I had participated in more than 20 rescue missions. Most were dangerous, some were terrifying. Few had gone horribly wrong, but none of them compared to Operation Black. River years later. Survivors would still talk about it. The mission seemed simple at first. A military reconnaissance drone had detected signs of life in an isolated riverside town. Nearly 80 survivors were trapped. The problem was the town itself. Thousands of infected had gathered there. No one knew why. The streets were packed so densely that from the drone footage it looked like a moving sea of bodies. Even veteran soldiers looked uneasy. The briefing room was silent. A map of the town glowed on the screen. We go in. We extract the civilians. We get out. One officer shook his head. There are too many infected. Another agreed. If something goes wrong, we'll be trapped. Adrian studied the map. Then he looked at the team. We're going. Nobody argued after that. The convoy departed before dawn. Point 3. Armored vehicles. Point 2. Transport trucks. Point 1. Extraction helicopter. Point 30. Soldiers, Cairo, Adrian, and me. As we approached the town, everyone became quiet. The streets were worse than the drone footage suggested. Infected wandered everywhere. Hundreds, thousands. The town looked dead. The first phase went smoothly. Our team entered through the industrial district. We eliminated small groups quietly. Reached the survivors, loaded them into vehicles. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Then disaster struck. A child screamed. Not one of the rescued civilians. An infected child hidden beneath a collapsed staircase. The sound echoed through the streets. For 1 second nothing happened. Then every infected in the area reacted. The noise that followed was horrifying. Thousands of voices, thousands of footsteps, thousands of infected turning toward us at once. Move! Adrian shouted. The entire town erupted. The horde came from every direction. Windows shattered, doors exploded inward. Bodies poured from alleyways. The streets became chaos. The soldiers fought desperately. Bullets flew. Vehicles accelerated. People screamed. The infected kept coming. I was helping survivors board a transport truck when I noticed a little girl frozen in fear. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her mother was screaming for her. The horde was closing in. Without thinking, I ran. The girl looked at me with terrified eyes. I grabbed her and turned back toward the convoy. Then the ground collapsed beneath me. The old sewer cover shattered. Suddenly I was falling. The child slipped from my arms. I managed to throw her upward toward nearby soldiers. Then I disappeared into darkness. The impact drove the air from my lungs. Pain exploded through my body. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't think. Then I heard them. The infected, hundreds of them above, and several already inside the sewer system. My flashlight had broken. My radio was damaged. My ankle screamed in pain. I was alone. For the first time since my rebirth, genuine fear gripped me. Not fear of dying. Fear of dying again. Above ground, chaos erupted. Nara. Cairo's voice echoed through the radio network. No answer. Adrian's face turned pale. What happened? She fell into the sewer system. Several soldiers tried to reach me. The horde cut them off. Down below, I forced myself to stand. Pain shot through my leg. Not broken, sprained, maybe worse, but usable. A growl echoed through the darkness. Then another. Then another. My flashlight flickered once before dying completely. The tunnel vanished into blackness. I drew my knife. The same knife Cairo had gifted me months earlier. The first infected appeared seconds later. I fought blindly. Point 1. Point 2. Point 3. More kept coming. I ran. The tunnels twisted endlessly beneath the town. Every turn looked the same. Every shadow felt alive. The sounds followed me everywhere. For nearly 40 minutes I struggled through darkness. The blood covered my clothes. My ankle was failing. My arms shook from exhaustion. Then I reached a dead end. My heart dropped. The tunnel ended at a collapsed section of concrete. No escape. The infected emerged from the darkness behind me. Dozens, then hundreds. I raised my knife. For the first time since my rebirth, I truly believed this might be the end. Above ground, Adrian ignored every order to withdraw. We're leaving now, a commander shouted. We lose everyone if we stay. Adrian pointed toward the sewer entrance. We're not leaving her. Cairo had already begun preparing a rescue team. His expression was terrifying. Cold, focused, furious. The soldiers around him stepped aside. Instinctively. Open the route. That was all he said. What followed became one of the most talked about moments in the base's history. Cairo and Adrian led a direct assault through the horde, not to save supplies, not to save equipment, not to recover Intelligence.to save one person. The rescue team fought through hundreds of infected. Every meter was paid for with blood and ammunition. Down below, I could hear the sounds, distant gunfire, explosions, shouting, hope. The infected surged toward me. I tightened my grip on the knife. One final stand, then a bright light exploded through the darkness. Gunfire echoed through the tunnel. Dozens of infected fell instantly. Nara. Cairo's voice. I nearly cried. The rescue team crashed into the tunnel like a storm. Adrian, Cairo. Point 6. Elite soldiers. The infected were torn apart by concentrated fire. Cairo reached me first. His face was pale. You idiot. I laughed weakly. Nice to see you too. Then my legs gave out. The last thing I remembered was Adrian catching me before I hit the ground. And for the first time since arriving at the base, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of the infected, not fear of failure, fear that he had almost lost someone important to him, and somewhere in the darkness before unconsciousness claimed me. I realized something else. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I had people who would come back for me. No matter how dangerous the mission became. Chapter 8, What Family Means. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the smell of disinfectant. The second thing I noticed was the pounding headache. The third thing I noticed was Cairo asleep in a chair beside my bed. His arms were crossed. His head tilted awkwardly against the wall. He looked ridiculous. I smiled. Then immediately regretted it as pain shot through my ribs. Unfortunately, that tiny movement woke him. His eyes snapped open instantly. The relief that flashed across his face lasted less than a second. Then it disappeared. You absolute menace. I blinked. Good morning to you too. You were unconscious for 2 days. Only 2? His expression darkened. Only? The door opened. Adrian walked in carrying a stack of reports. The moment he saw me awake, he stopped. For a brief second, his carefully controlled expression cracked. Relief. Pure relief. Then the mask returned. Welcome back. Thanks. You nearly died. I sighed. So I've been told. Cairo pointed at me. 3 fractured ribs. I nodded. Severe sprain. Yes. 27 stitches. That sounds excessive. Adrian sat down. No more rescue missions for at least 6 weeks. I immediately objected. No. Yes. No. Yes. Cairo schmiegel. Nice to know near-death experiences haven't improved your personality. For the next week I remained in the medical wing. It was torture. Not because of the injuries. Because everyone kept visiting. Farid arrived carrying fruit. Salma brought homemade food. Lena came with books. Even soldiers I barely knew stopped by. Apparently Operation Black River had become famous throughout the base. One afternoon a nurse entered carrying flowers. I frowned. Who sent those? The nurse checked the card. No name. Cairo looked suspicious. Adrian looked suspicious. I looked suspicious. Nobody ever discovered who sent them. The strangest visitor arrived 3 days later. A small knock sounded on the hospital room door. Then it slowly opened. I froze. Standing there were Maya and Sammy. For a moment none of us moved. The children had grown. They looked healthier than when they'd arrived. Safer. But older somehow. The apocalypse had taken away some of their childhood. Nara? Maya whispered. My heart stopped. How had they found me? Then I realized. The medical wing wasn't entirely restricted. And after months at the base, eventually someone had mentioned my name. Sammy stared. His eyes widened. Nara. Before anyone could stop him, he ran across the room and hugged me. Oof. My injured ribs protested immediately. Sorry. He jumped back. Maya's eyes filled with tears. We thought you were dead. The words hit harder than any wound. For a moment I didn't know what to say. Because these children had never hurt me. They had never betrayed me. They had loved me. I'm alive. Maya started crying. Not loudly. Just quiet tears of relief. Without thinking, I opened my arms. She hugged me too. Across the room, Cairo and Adrian exchanged a look. Neither interrupted. Eventually Maya wiped her eyes. Mom and Dad don't know you're here. I nodded. I know. We didn't tell them. Sammy crossed his arms proudly. We wanted to ask you first. I almost laughed. Even now they were protecting me. Thank you. The children stayed for nearly an hour. They talked about school programs inside the base. New friends. Life in Sector 8. Normal things. For a little while, it felt like the apocalypse didn't exist. When they finally left, silence filled the room. Adrian spoke first. They care about you. I stared at the closed door. Yes. Cairo leaned back. The parents still don't know. No. Do you want them to? No. The answer came instantly. Neither man looked surprised. After a moment Adrian asked quietly. Do you ever think about confronting them? I remembered the broken window. The terror. The pain. Watching them survive after my death. Every day. The room became silent. But not yet. That evening, after everyone left, I sat alone by the hospital window. The base lights glowed below. Soldiers patrolled. Children played in safe streets. Families shared meals. People laughed. People lived. And for the first time, I realized something important. In my first life, I had spent years caring for other people's family while being separated from my own. Now, somewhere in Country K, my mother and my 3 children might still be waiting for me. Might still be alive. Might still believe I would come home. A knock interrupted my thoughts. I turned. Adrian stood in the doorway. For once, he looked unusually serious. What happened? He entered the room carrying a sealed folder. One marked with military communication codes. International communication codes. My heart immediately began pounding. Adrian sat beside the bed. Carefully. Quietly. Then he handed me the folder. We finally received a response from Country K. The world seemed to stop. My hands trembled as I reached for the folder. Because after 8 long months, there might finally be news about my mother. About my daughters. About my son. And whether the family I had sacrificed everything to protect was still alive. Chapter 9, Home Comes Back. My hands shook so badly that I could barely open the folder. For a moment, I was afraid. Afraid of hope. Afraid of disappointment. Afraid of learning that I had been too late. Adrian sat quietly beside me. Cairo stood near the window. Neither man spoke. Neither man rushed me. Finally, I opened the file. Inside were photographs. Recent photographs. My breath caught instantly. The first image showed my mother standing in front of the countryside house. Older. Thinner. But alive. The second showed my daughters. One was holding a basket of vegetables. The other was laughing at something outside the frame. Alive. The third photograph showed my son. He had grown taller. His smile was exactly the same. Alive. All of them. Alive. I broke down. Months of fear. Months of uncertainty. Months of pretending to be strong. They all shattered at once. The next thing I knew, Adrian was holding my shoulders while I cried. For once, nobody tried to stop me. Nobody told me to calm down. Nobody told me to be strong. Because some tears deserved to be shed. When I finally managed to breathe again, I looked at the final page. Then froze. There was one more name. One more person listed among the survivors. My brother. I blinked, then blinked again. No way. Cairo frowned. What? I pointed at the page. My brother. The 2 men exchanged a glance. That's a good thing, isn't it? Adrian asked. I laughed, then laughed harder. Good. Now they both looked confused. My brother is insane. What? Not dangerous insane. I wiped my eyes. Scientist insane. Cairo groaned. Oh no. He once built a working drone from discarded electronics because he was bored. Adrian sighed. That's actually impressive. That's not even in the top 10 weird things he's done. For the first time in months, I laughed until my stomach hurt. 3 weeks later, a military transport convoy arrived. At the base, the operation had taken enormous effort. International coordination, military escorts, air and sea transport, multiple survivor settlements cooperating together. When I learned the convoy had reached the outer checkpoint, I practically ran there despite still recovering. Cairo spent the entire trip yelling at me to slow down. I ignored him. The gates opened, vehicles rolled through, dozens of survivors emerged. Then I saw her. My mother. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she dropped her bag. Nara. I ran the distance. Disappeared. My mother wrapped her arms around me. Neither of us cared who was watching. For months she had believed she might never see me again. For months I had feared exactly the same thing. Now we were together. We cried. We laughed. We cried again. Then 3 small figures pushed through the crowd. Mom. I froze. My daughters. My son. The children launched themselves at me. I somehow caught all 3 despite nearly falling over. Mom. We missed you. Grandma said you'd come. Tears blurred everything. I hugged them so tightly that they complained. I didn't let go. Not for a very long time. Behind me, Cairo quietly turned away. Adrian suddenly found something extremely interesting to look at in the opposite direction. Neither man wanted anyone noticing that their eyes looked suspiciously red. Then another voice spoke. Well. I turned. And immediately groaned. Standing beside a truck was my younger brother. His hair was a disaster. His glasses were crooked. His clothes were stained with grease. And he was smiling. Nara. David. We stared at each other. Then he opened his arms. I hugged him. For approximately 3 seconds. Then I pushed him away. You look terrible. So do you. Fair. My mother smacked both of us. The children laughed. For the first time since the apocalypse began, our entire family was together. That evening everyone gathered for dinner. My children quickly adopted Cairo as their favorite person. Mostly because he taught them card games. And because he made ridiculous faces. David, meanwhile, spent most of the meal talking with Adrian. Which turned out to be a mistake. Because once my brother discovered the military base had laboratories, he became unstoppable. You have functioning research facilities? Yes. Power generation? Yes. Computers? Some. David looked like he'd just discovered treasure. Adrian looked increasingly concerned. By the end of the conversation, David had volunteered himself for approximately 12 research projects. And somehow convinced 3 military scientists to help him. The next morning, Adrian found me laughing outside headquarters. Your brother is terrifying. I smiled. I warned you. He slept for 4 hours and somehow redesigned 2 supply systems. Sounds like David. Adrian shook his head. Then his expression softened. He glanced toward the family housing district where my children were playing. You seem happier. I looked in the same direction. At my mother. My brother. My daughters. My son. My family. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, they were safe. Yes. My voice was quiet. But certain. I finally have something worth fighting for. And somewhere in another sector of the base, the Hassan family remained. Completely unaware that the woman they had once thrown away now stood, surrounded by people who loved her, powerful allies, and a family that had crossed countries to find her again. The balance between them was changing. And fate was slowly bringing their paths closer together. Chapter 10, An Unfortunate Reunion. For nearly a year, I managed to avoid the Hassan family. The base was enormous. Thousands of people lived there. Entire districts existed within the walls. Avoiding a few people wasn't difficult. Until one morning. I had just finished a meeting with one of David's research teams when I stopped by a supply office. I was reviewing evacuation maps when someone suddenly froze behind me. Then came a familiar voice. A voice I had hoped never to hear again. Nara? My stomach dropped. Slowly, I turned around. Mrs. Hassan stood in the doorway. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Her eyes widened. Then narrowed. Then widened again. You? I simply stared. For a moment, shock dominated her face. Then something else appeared. Anger. You're alive? The question almost made me laugh. Yes. Mrs. Hassan looked around the office. At the military. Personnel.at the documents. In my hands.at the security. Badge around my neck, confusion flashed. Across her face. What are you doing here? Working. That answer seemed to offend her. Working? She repeated, you are our maid. The room became silent, several nearby officers looked up from their desks. I calmly placed the documents down. I was. Mrs. Hassan folded her arms. Then, why are you in the restricted district? I blinked. Because I have authorization. She laughed, actually laughed. That's impossible. The nearby officers were beginning to look entertained. Mrs. Hassan pointed toward me. There must be some mistake. She's a house help. She doesn't belong here. One lieutenant nearly choked. Trying not to laugh. I could already feel a headache forming. Unfortunately, Mrs. Hassan wasn't finished. I want to speak to whoever allowed her inside. A familiar voice answered from behind her. That would be me. The entire room went quiet. Adrian had arrived. Mrs. Hassan turned confidently. The confidence lasted approximately 2 seconds because she immediately recognized one of the most influential people in the entire base. Sir. Adrian glanced at me, then at her, then back at me. His expression suggested he already understood exactly what was happening. Mrs. Hassan pointed at me. This woman shouldn't be here. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Oh? She's a maid. The silence that followed was beautiful. Several Officers suddenly became very interested in their paperwork. Adrian calmly folded his arms. And Mrs. Hassan blinked. And she shouldn't have access to higher level districts. Adrian looked genuinely confused. Why not? Because she's a maid. At that point, one captain quietly walked out of the room before he started. Laughing, Adrian looked toward me. Nara. Yes. Are you currently assigned to rescue operations? Yes. Training programs? Yes. Strategic planning? Occasionally. Research coordination? Sometimes. Adrian nodded, then he turned back to Mrs. Hassan. She is qualified for every district she enters. Mrs. Hassan's face turned red. But, no. The single word ended the discussion. Completely. Mrs. Hassan stood frozen, while several officers openly failed to hide their amusement. For the first time, she realized something she had never considered. The woman she once treated as disposable was now respected throughout the base. And she could do absolutely nothing about it. Humiliated, Mrs. Hassan stormed away. Unfortunately for her, she immediately told her husband, which made everything worse. That evening, Mr. Hassan and his oldest son marched directly to administration headquarters. Their argument was simple. If a former maid can access higher districts, then we should too. The officers listening looked stunned. Not because of the request. Because of the reasoning. When Adrian heard about the complaint, he summoned them. Cairo was present as well. Which was never a good sign. Mr. Hassan launched into a lengthy speech. His son joined in. They talked about status, connections, qualifications, what they deserved. Then they demanded special access. Adrian listened patiently. When they finally finished, he asked one question. What contribution have you made to the base? Silence. The older son frowned. What? Adrian repeated the question. What contribution have you made? More silence, because neither man had a good answer. They worked, they followed rules, but so did thousands of others. Cairo finally spoke. Actually, I have an idea. The smile on his face immediately worried everyone, even Adrian looked concerned. 20 minutes later, the punishment orders were issued. Mr. Hassan. Mrs. Hassan and their oldest son, community sanitation duty, across the entire base, for 3 months, toilet maintenance, cleaning, stations, waste disposal support, the least glamorous jobs available. The official reason was simple: disrespecting personnel, disrupting operations, and creating unnecessary administrative problems. The entire base learned about it within 24 hours. The embarrassment was spectacular. Meanwhile, Maya and Sammy received completely different treatment. The younger siblings had excellent records. They volunteered regularly, helped elderly survivors, assisted education programs, and had never caused trouble. As a result, they were offered special educational opportunities and access to advanced youth programs within the base. When the children learned about it, they were thrilled. When their parents learned about it, they were furious. Why do they get privileges? The administrators' answer was immediate. Because they earned them. There was no further argument after that. A few days later, I encountered Maya and Sammy again. Both children were excited about their new programs. I'm learning engineering, Sammy announced proudly. And I'm in the Leadership Academy, Maya added. I smiled. You both deserve it. The children beamed. As they ran off toward their classes, I watched them go. The parents had chosen selfishness, the older son had chosen arrogance. But Maya and Sammy had chosen kindness. And in the end, the base rewarded people for what they did, not who they thought they were. From a nearby balcony, Adrian watched the children disappear into the distance. They'll do well. I nodded. Yes. Then I glanced toward the sanitation district where Mr. Hassan, Mrs. Hassan, and their oldest son were beginning another long day of cleaning duties. For once, fate seemed to have a sense of humor. Chapter 11, The Complaint That Backfired. Life at the base continued to improve. David's research team was making progress. My children had settled into their new schools. Rescue missions continued. And for the first time in years, there was genuine hope that humanity might survive. Then came the arrival of the Northern Convoy. The convoy stretched for nearly 2 kilometers. Armored vehicles, supply trucks, scientific equipment, medical units, engineers, researchers, hundreds of specialists. The entire base gathered near the gates to watch. Even I was curious. Adrian stood beside me. Cairo was nearby. David had somehow climbed onto a crate for a better view. The gates opened. The first vehicle stopped. A distinguished older man stepped out. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. Military posture. The soldiers immediately straightened. Even senior officers stood at attention. I glanced at Adrian. Your father? He sighed. Unfortunately. I laughed. The older man immediately spotted us. Then he marched directly toward Adrian. For several seconds they simply stared at one another. Then Adrian's father pulled him into a hug. The entire crowd froze. Apparently very few people had ever seen the famous General Malik act like a normal parent. I heard you almost got yourself killed again. Hello to you too. Answer the question. Cairo immediately walked away. Smart man, I muttered. The general heard me. His gaze shifted toward me. So you're Nara? I blinked. You know who I am? My son talks about you. Adrian nearly choked. I smiled. Oh? The general's smile was dangerous. Quite often. Adrian looked ready to disappear into the ground. For once, it was glorious. Then another vehicle arrived. A woman stepped out. Confident. Elegant. Sharp-eyed. The resemblance to Adrian was unmistakable. His sister. Commander Layla Malik. Unlike Adrian, she looked delighted to meet new people. Within 10 minutes she had somehow befriended my children. David, Cairo, and half the scientists. David immediately started discussing research. That should have been a warning sign. 3 hours later they were designing new projects together. No one could stop them. Meanwhile, the Hassan family watched all of this from a distance. And Mr. Hassan came to a conclusion. A terrible conclusion. He believed Adrian was favoring me. The fact that I worked closely with Adrian. The fact that I knew Cairo. The fact that my family now lived in the research district. The fact that Maya and Sammy liked me. That I in his mind. All of it could only mean one thing: corruption. Which led to the single worst decision he had made since the apocalypse began. He filed an official complaint. Against Adrian. Against Cairo. And against me. The complaint accused us of abusing authority. Showing favoritism. Misusing resources. And unfairly targeting his family. When the report reached administration, everyone became very interested. Not because they believed it. Because it was bold. Incredibly bold. Especially since the complaint landed on the desk of General Malik. Adrian's father. And Commander Layla Malik. His sister. Both of whom immediately requested a formal review. Mr. Hassan was thrilled. For approximately 24 hours. Then the investigation began. And everything collapsed. The investigators reviewed mission records. Training records. Personnel evaluations. Volunteer reports. Community service logs. Witness statements. The results were devastating. Every privilege I had received had been earned. Every promotion had been approved by multiple departments. Every assignment Cairo had given me was properly documented. Every disciplinary action against the Hassan family had followed regulations. Meanwhile, investigators discovered something else. Mr. Hassan had submitted multiple false accusations, repeatedly disrupted administration, and attempted to pressure officials into granting special treatment. The findings were presented publicly before a disciplinary board. The embarrassment was catastrophic. The room was packed. Mr. Hassan sat rigidly. Mrs. Hassan looked pale. Their oldest son appeared miserable. Then General Malik spoke. The entire room became silent. Do you understand the seriousness of making false accusations during a crisis? Mr. Hassan swallowed. Yes, sir. No. The general's voice was calm. Dangerously calm. You clearly do not. Even senior officers looked nervous. The general continued. People are dying every day. Scientists are working without rest. Soldiers are risking their lives. Medical staff are exhausted. And you chose to waste resources. Because you were unhappy about cleaning duties. The silence was absolute. Then Commander Layla opened another file. We also reviewed volunteer records. Her eyes shifted toward Maya and Sammy. The younger children consistently contribute to the community. She smiled warmly. They are excellent examples of citizenship. The children looked stunned. Then Layla's expression turned cold as she looked at the adults. The same cannot be said for the complaint's authors. Ouch. Even I felt that one. The final decision came shortly afterward. Mr. Hassan, Mrs. Hassan, and their oldest son. 6 additional months of community labor. Mandatory volunteer service. And loss of several non-essential privileges. The room practically exploded with whispers. Mr. Hassan looked like he might faint. His oldest son looked ready to disappear. Mrs. Hassan looked furious. Unfortunately for them, the decision was final. As everyone left, General Malik stopped beside me. You handled all of this remarkably well. I smiled. Thank you. He glanced toward the departing Hassan family. Then back toward me. My son chooses his friends carefully. I blinked. Friends? The general's smile widened. Yes. Then he walked away. Across the room, Adrian had suddenly developed a deep interest in a nearby wall. Cairo was laughing so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. And for the first time in years, I found myself laughing too. Because while the Hassan family kept digging themselves deeper into trouble, my own life kept growing richer. A family reunited. Children safe. Friends who stood beside me. And people powerful enough to judge me by my actions rather than my job title. The balance between my old life and my new one had never been clearer. Chapter 12, The Antidote. 2 years after the apocalypse began, humanity finally had something it hadn't possessed in a very long time. Hope. Real hope. Not rumors. Not wishful thinking. Not desperate prayers. Hope backed by science. It began with David. Which, in hindsight, should have worried everyone. My brother had spent 2 years living almost entirely inside the research district. The man barely slept. Forgot meals. Lost track of time. And somehow convinced dozens of scientists to work on projects that most people considered impossible. One evening, I found him asleep on top of a laboratory desk. His face was pressed against several hundred pages of research notes. I took a picture. Naturally. Blackmail material was important between siblings. 3 hours later, David discovered the picture. He was not amused. I was. Very amused. The next morning, alarms sounded throughout the research district. Not emergency alarms. Priority notification alarms. Every senior scientist was summoned. Every military commander was called. Every major administrator was informed. Something had happened. Something important. I arrived at the laboratory with Adrian and Cairo. The building was packed. Scientists rushed through corridors. Military escorts stood at every entrance. Inside the main conference room, David looked like he hadn't slept in days. Which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the expression on his face. Excitement. Disbelief. Hope. My stomach tightened. What happened? David looked directly at me, then he smiled. We did it. The room became silent. We think we've done it. Nobody breathed. David activated the presentation screen. Charts appeared. Research. Data, medical scans, laboratory results. Then came the words everyone had been waiting years to hear. We have developed an antidote. Silence, absolute silence, for several seconds. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody reacted. Then the room erupted. Scientists shouted, some cried, others laughed, several simply sat down. Because their legs stopped working. The antidote wasn't magic. It couldn't revive the dead. Anyone fully transformed remained lost, but there was a breakthrough. People recently infected could be saved. If administered quickly enough, the antidote stopped the transformation process completely. For the first time since the outbreak began, a bite wasn't automatically a death sentence. Humanity finally had a weapon. A real weapon. The following months became a blur. Production facilities expanded, research teams multiplied, military convoys transported supplies, scientists from settlements around the world shared data, and David became famous, which he hated. Please make them stop interviewing me. No. Nara. No. This is bullying. Correct. Cairo nearly fell out of his chair laughing. Meanwhile, Adrian's father and sister coordinated international distribution programs. The military organized protection for production centers. The research district expanded into an entire scientific complex. Everywhere people worked, everywhere people fought, everywhere people hoped. Then came the announcement. The first large-scale antidote deployment had succeeded. Thousands of lives were saved, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. For the first time in years, humanity began reclaiming territory. Cities once considered lost were retaken, communities reopened, trade routes returned, schools expanded, farms multiplied. The future no longer looked impossible. One evening, as celebrations spread through the base, I stood on a balcony overlooking the settlement. Lights stretched across the horizon. Children played below, music drifted through the streets, people laughed. Life, real life. Adrian joined me. We survived. I smiled. We did. For several moments neither of us spoke. Then I noticed something across the courtyard. Maya and Sammy were helping distribute supplies to new arrivals. The younger children had grown into remarkable young adults, kind, compassionate, hardworking. Nearby, My own children were laughing with Cairo.my. Mother sat with General Malik and Commander Layla, somehow managing to boss all of them around. David was being chased by reporters again. Some things never changed. I laughed. Adrian followed my gaze. Your family looks happy. I looked at them. At all of them.my children.my mother.my brother.my friends. My friends. The people who had become family. Yes. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, the answer came without hesitation. Very happy. And somewhere in the crowd stood the Hassan family. Watching. Learning. Perhaps finally understanding. The woman they once threw away had not only survived. She had helped build the future. Not through revenge. Not through hatred. But by choosing to live. And in the end, that victory was greater than anything revenge could have given her. Chapter 13, New Beginnings. The years after the antidote changed everything. The infected threat didn't disappear overnight, but humanity was winning. Cities were being rebuilt. Roads reopened. Schools and hospitals returned. For the first time since the apocalypse, people were planning futures instead of merely surviving the next day. And with peace came something unexpected. Love. It started with Cairo. Though neither of us realized it at first. Or perhaps everyone realized it except us. According to my children, the entire base had known for over a year. Mom. My oldest daughter sighed dramatically one evening. You and Uncle Cairo are ridiculous. I blinked. What? My son nodded. Everyone knows. Knows what? The children exchanged looks. Then groaned simultaneously. I was offended. Only slightly. Fine. Maybe significantly. The problem was that Cairo had become part of every important moment in our lives. When my children arrived, he was there. When David nearly blew up part of a laboratory, Cairo was there. When rescue missions succeeded, he was there. When things went wrong, he was there. At some point, his presence had stopped feeling special. Because it felt natural. Which, according to my mother, was exactly the problem. One evening she cornered me. Nara. Yes? You love him. I nearly choked on my tea. No. My mother gave me a look. The kind only mothers possess. The terrifying kind. Yes, you do. I fled. Unfortunately, she was right. I just wasn't ready to admit it. The realization finally came during a rescue operation. A bridge collapsed during an evacuation. Several survivors were trapped. The situation became dangerous almost instantly. For one terrible moment, Cairo disappeared beneath falling debris. My heart stopped. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Physically. The world seemed to freeze. Nothing mattered except finding him. The relief I felt when he emerged unharmed was overwhelming. And suddenly everything became obvious. Oh. Oh no. I loved him. That was unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Because Cairo immediately noticed something had changed. 3 days later he cornered me after training. Nara. What? You've been acting strange. I have not. You absolutely have. I looked away. Cairo smiled. Slowly. Dangerously. Then he stepped closer. Nara. What? I love you. I forgot how words worked. For nearly 10 seconds. Which Cairo found hilarious. Then I punched his arm. Hard. Ow. Why would you say that so casually? Because it's true. I stared. Then smiled. For the first time. Good. Cairo blinked. Good. Because I love you too. The grin that appeared on his face could probably be seen from space. My children celebrated for 3 straight days. Apparently they had been taking bets. I chose not to ask questions. Some truths were better left undiscovered. Meanwhile, Adrian was facing a very different problem. He had spent years avoiding relationships. Years. After losing his wife, he had convinced himself that chapter of his life was over. Then he met Sarah. A doctor who had arrived from one of the newly restored cities. Brilliant. Compassionate. Completely unimpressed by his reputation. Which immediately fascinated him. The first time they met, Sarah interrupted one of his speeches. In front of several hundred people. To tell him he was wrong. Cairo laughed for an entire week. Adrian did not. At first. Then he started spending more time around the medical district. Pure coincidence, obviously. Nobody believed that. Least of all Sarah. Eventually she confronted him. Are you following me? No. Then why are you here every day? Adrian opened his mouth. Then closed it. Sarah laughed. And somehow that was the beginning. Months later, Adrian finally admitted what everyone already knew. He had fallen in love again. For the first time since losing his wife. When he told me, I hugged him. Not because he had found love. because he had finally allowed himself to live again. Then there was David. And Layla. The disaster nobody saw coming. Except everyone saw it coming. David and Layla spent years working together. Research projects. Infrastructure programs. Scientific development. Entire settlements benefited from their work. Unfortunately, they also spent years arguing. Constantly. About everything. Research. Logistics. Technology. Coffee. Especially coffee. The coffee debate lasted 3 months. No one remembers how it started. Only that it became frighteningly intense. Then one day my youngest daughter asked an innocent question. Are Uncle David and Aunt Layla married? The room exploded. Layla turned bright red. David nearly dropped a laptop. Cairo fell out of his chair laughing. And I realized something. The feelings had been there for a long time. Neither of them had noticed. Or perhaps neither wanted to admit it. Eventually that changed too. A late-night research session. A shared victory. A conversation that lasted until sunrise. And suddenly two people who had spent years arguing discovered they didn't want to imagine life without each other. When David finally confessed his feelings, he apparently presented a 14-page report explaining his reasoning. Layla still teases him about it. Relentlessly. And so, years after the apocalypse began, life moved forward. Nara and Cairo. Adrian and Sarah. David and Layla. 3 different love stories. 3 different futures. And one evening, as families gathered beneath the lights of the rebuilt city, I looked around and realized something extraordinary. The world had ended. Yet somehow, against all odds, we had found happiness afterward. Not because life had become perfect, but because we had chosen to keep living long enough to see tomorrow. The reunion. Years later. The house was unusually quiet, which was never a good sign. I sat up from the couch. Cairo. Yes? Where are the twins? Cairo looked up from his book, the color immediately drained from his face. Oh. No. Exactly. Oh no. Silence. Then distant shouting, then laughter, then a crash. We both sighed. The twins had apparently found a new way to terrorize the neighborhood. Again. Some things never changed. Fortunately, before we could investigate, another sound echoed through the house. A notification. My communicator. I glanced at the screen. Then froze. My heart immediately began racing. What is it? Cairo asked. I stared at the message. Then smiled. My children. The older 3. The children I had raised before the apocalypse. The children who were now adults. The children who had chosen military service. Each had been stationed in different regions, helping protect and rebuild the world. Because of their assignments, years could pass between visits. Months ago they had all been deployed. Now they were coming home. All at once. Cairo immediately stood. Oh. Then he smiled. Oh. The twins ran into the room. What happened? Are we under attack? Can we help? No. Can we still help? No. The twins looked disappointed. Which worried me. A lot. Because disappointment usually led to creativity. And creativity led to property damage. The next morning the entire family gathered near the transport terminal. My mother was there. David and Layla. Adrian, Sarah, and Emma. Maya and Sammy. The twins. Half the neighborhood. Apparently everyone wanted to attend. Then the first transport arrived. The doors opened. A young woman stepped out. My eldest daughter. For a second I simply stared. The little girl who had once hidden behind my legs was gone. In her place stood a confident military officer. Strong. Capable. Respected. Then she smiled. And suddenly she looked exactly like the child I remembered. Mom. I was already moving. The hug nearly knocked both of us over. Neither of us cared. Years disappeared in an instant. My daughter laughed through tears. I missed you. I missed you too. The second transport arrived moments later. My second daughter emerged. She had become a logistics commander, which apparently involved managing enough supplies to feed entire cities. David immediately started asking questions. She immediately started answering. Layla groaned. The science and logistics discussion lasted 30 minutes. Nobody could stop it. Then came my son. The youngest of the older 3. Now taller than me. Which I absolutely refused to acknowledge. Mom. You're not taller than me. He blinked. I literally am. No. Mom. No. Cairo immediately walked away because he was laughing too hard. Traitor. Within minutes all 3 older children were surrounded by family. Stories filled the air. Questions, laughter, memories. The twins attached themselves to their older siblings immediately. Tell us about battles. No. Tell us about explosions. Definitely no. Tell us about tanks. Maybe. The twins considered that a victory. Later that evening, everyone gathered for a massive family dinner. Tables filled the courtyard. Lights hung overhead. Children ran everywhere. The atmosphere felt warm, comfortable, safe. The way home should feel. At one point, I looked around the table. My mother sat at the center of a conversation. David and Layla were debating something scientific. Adrian and Sarah were discussing future reconstruction projects. Emma was helping the twins plan something that looked suspiciously illegal. Cairo was trying to stop them, failing. Maya and Sammy were laughing nearby. And my older children sat beside me. Healthy. Alive. Home. For a moment, nobody noticed I had gone quiet. Except Cairo. His hand found mine beneath the table. You okay? I looked around once more. At everyone. My family. The people I loved most in the world. Then I remembered another life. A life where I had died alone. A life where I never saw my children grow up. A life where I never met Cairo. Never reunited with my mother. Never watched humanity rebuild. A life that now felt impossibly distant. I squeezed Cairo's hand. Yes. My voice was soft. More than okay. As laughter filled the courtyard and the stars shone overhead, I realized that this was the future I had fought for. Not revenge. Not power. Not recognition. This. A family reunited. Children grown. Friends beside me. A world healing. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Nara's story had exactly the ending she wanted.